Welcome, everyone. This is Work Made Human. I'm Nicole Mendez, Director of Talent Acquisition at BAM.
And I'm Jill Vaglin, Head of People at BAM. And with us today, coming from Connecticut, is Sofia Noori, co-founder and CEO of Nema Health. Welcome, Sophia.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Sophia, we're so excited to be able to chat with you today. We do this show because we really believe in the power of storytelling, and behind every startup, there is that really human story to tell. Oftentimes, there's also that aha moment that also essentially sparked it. So you were the first, correct me if I'm wrong, chief resident of digital psychiatry at Yale, where you were able to see the gap between the more traditional once-a-week therapy and then what trauma survivors actually need. So what was the specific moment where you realized, for me, it is important to leave the hospital system and start a startup?
Yeah, great question, Nicole. I mean, I think it was I'm not sure if there was like necessarily an aha moment, but there was a moment where I was like, we could actually we could now do this. Like there's enough of a confluence around like digital mental health and like telehealth tools and innovation, like technology here that could help to actually like really unlock this and like bring it to you know to scale and to like to a national population. So I think like for me like that occurred, but I had always known that this was like a really big problem. My family were refugees for the Vietnam War, and so I grew up hearing about how trauma had affected them. Then, unfortunately, when I was in college, I also developed PTSD after an incident, and then became a rape crisis counselor after that. And so, before I went to medical school, I was already like so fired up around how we treat trauma survivors, and whether they find recovery or not, right? And then going to psychiatry residency at Yale just kind of underscored the huge gap between what happens in practice for trauma survivors and actually what the practice guidelines say they should get, right? And then when I was in residency, it was during COVID. So I and my co-founder Isabel were actually like back on the COVID wards, treating patients on the medical wards and then quarantining at the same time. And during that period, a lot came out in digital mental health, right? Like there was apps and like meditation things and like therapy apps too, like coming out. But it really felt like a lot of it was for lower acuity patients and not necessarily, the community mental health patients that we were seeing, but we knew could really benefit from some of these technologies if some of it was designed for them, right? And so there was an aha moment where we realized like, there's enough here. There's like enough around tech enablement now and like telehealth and things like that could potentially unlock a care model that could really deliver this care at scale and make it accessible. And I think the other piece too around trauma survivors and PTSD is that one of the symptoms of PTSD is avoidance, right? People avoid triggers, things that might distress them as they relate to the trauma. And there's actually research to show that when these trauma survivors get therapy via telehealth, they avoid less. Like, and they're actually more likely to come to the therapy sessions and complete treatment. And so there was like a synergy between like, yeah, we have all of this, like these ways to kind of like access, this population better and like support them better. And actually it leads to better care, right? So like once I think we kind of observed like all of these little threads, it made sense to try something.
So Nema Health really it focuses on the more intensive model. For anyone listening in, the intensive model just meaning multiple sessions within the same week with the goal of let's help you feel better much sooner. So in a work culture that really is driving down speed, efficiency constantly, right? Buzzwords we're talking about is that slow and steady approach, the more traditional way to mental health failing us? Is it just different? And what's the learning here? What can leaders learn from the intensive model of recovery?
Yeah. And great question, Nicole. I mean, I think that, with mental health care, there's kind of a status quo about like what people think therapy looks like, right? And it's generally like once a week, right? where you kind of your therapist asks you like how your week has been and like what's new, like what's come up, and we call it like supportive therapy, where they're basically supporting you through whatever you choose to bring up, right? And there's no like there's no like treatment guideline that says that therapy should be dosed once per week, right? And there's also like when things are, as you're saying, like slow and steady, that's not necessarily an actual treatment if somebody has a mental health condition, right? And so I think within mental health, like I think that we would do better to think about like what actually are the specific types of treatments that people need. And we don't think about therapy as having a dose. The way that we think about medications having a dose, but therapy is also medicine, right? And
Mhm.
so, one of the things that we spent time doing in the beginning is really just trying to understand like, what is, like, if I wanted to give someone the most outstanding care possible, right? Like, and like, and what I usually say is like, if you had to design a care model that would help your mother or your friend after they went through something like unspeakable, what is the best model that will help them recover the most, right? And so that was the question that we were trying to answer from the research and from what we knew about available treatments. And that backed us into an intensive model of care because there is evidence to show that the dose of trauma therapy that works the best is actually more than once per week. It's called massed or intensive treatment in the literature. And so when you actually give people a higher dose of therapy, not only do they get better faster, but the likelihood that they will actually complete the treatment is also greater, which is like one of the outcomes, right? They also complete, like they basically complete in a month what they would complete in 3 months, right? And going to this avoidance thing and this distress thing, people don't necessarily want to slap the band-aid back on after like an hour of therapy, kind of limp through the next 6 days, come back, right? It's actually more distressing sometimes. And so that's actually how we landed on this intensive approach. It's like, I think sometimes slow and steady is helpful, but also sometimes maybe that's actually not the most effective way to do it. And so we weren't necessarily trying to make a statement about speed or, those types of pieces. We were really looking at how do you create the most effective product for like the patient.
I appreciate you just painting the picture too of I never would have thought of it in that sense of dose. And I go to therapy
Yeah.
once a week.
Yeah.
And I mean, the data, right? There are a lot of trauma survivors. So that was very helpful.
Same. That really, you just saying therapy is medicine, that something like just like that struck me really powerfully. And talking about each session as a dose, something about that like really
Yeah.
stuck. And I feel like that really resonates. What a powerful way to communicate that. Thank you. So
Course.
work made human, a lot of what we're talking about as well
Mhm.
is with you leaders, your own organizations, the teams that you're
Yeah.
running, and you have a team of clinicians who deal with, as we're talking about, real heavy human stories all day. As a CEO, as their leader, how do you intentionally design a workplace that protects their emotional capacity? Like, you want to make sure that they have the ability to support and to listen and to be there and to heal and all these things. How do you
Yeah.
protect them from the burnout while they're trying to save other people?
Yeah, great question, Jill. Well, I'll say first of all, it's like always a work in progress, right? And especially as like a clinic that's rapidly growing, that's like scaling, this is something that we like wrestle with all the time, frankly. And sometimes we get it right, sometimes we don't, and we rely on like their feedback and also just like these, just like really soul searching about how to best do this, especially as we like balance the different needs of the company and the patients too. I will say though that like the other and like I think unfair advantage that I have as a founder is that I am a clinician who is trained to do trauma therapy myself, right? And so in the beginning, I saw all the patients. I literally had a full caseload of patients myself and was doing trauma therapy with them, with like 5 back-to-back sessions, and like also had to. I've kind of figured out. I think we all figured out like kind of how our initial approach to clinician well-being would be, because we literally tested it on ourselves. And so one thing that I was really concerned about in the beginning is vicarious trauma, right? And like would just seeing PTSD patients and trauma survivors like day in and day out really, grind people down. And what we actually saw was the opposite, is that people got really fired up actually about seeing these folks because they actually witness people get better. And you don't often see that in mental health, like frankly, like even as a psychiatrist, right? Like even with like our most effective meds, when folks are like actively psychotic and you give them an antipsychotic and help them get better, right? Like there's actually not that many things that help people in a short amount of time, like with a super visible improvement, right? And so, in our care model, because it's intensive, on average, our trauma survivors have suffered from PTSD for about 18 years before they come to see us, right? And the average time to recovery in our program, meaning they literally lose the diagnosis of PTSD and the therapist can tell them, you don't have this condition anymore, is 39 days. And so it's like actually amazing to see people, like to witness it, right? And to be part of that process of like shepherding somebody through something they never thought they would, you know, like recover from. It's incredibly powerful. And so I honestly find it like so invigorating and it makes me want to do it again and again. It's almost like a little dopamine hit.
Sure,
And
for sure.
so I tend to call it like vicarious joy in some ways because you actually see it. It's amazing. It works faster than meds in some ways, right? When you can actually dose it correctly. Um, and so it hasn't actually been as like, I think, as stark of an issue as I had expected it to be. The other
Yeah.
piece too is that the trauma therapies don't necessarily, the one that we use doesn't require folks to detail out their narrative, their trauma narrative. So the therapist actually focuses on the impact that the trauma has had on the survivor,
Yeah.
not necessarily witnessing and listening to every single detail, right? And
Yeah.
so I think that's actually protective for the therapist too.
Wow, that level of reward is huge. I mean, you being able to feel that level of purpose in your job, and like you said, so quickly, that's remarkable.
It's
That's
wild.
staggering. I'm wow, wow, wow.
Meaningful work and listening
Super
to your
meaningful.
right as
Yeah,
well.
Yeah. 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 And
yeah,
again, it's like never perfect. Like we're always like struggling to figure out like what's the right caseload, right? Like how many hours is ideal and all of these things.
yeah, yeah. And as you talked about, it's never going to be perfect and you're growing,
Yeah.
you're scaling. And really with what you all are doing, there has to be a deep, deep foundation of trust amongst
Yeah.
yourselves, with your patients. They have to trust you with their deepest traumas. So what does trust and even really that radical transparency look like inside your team, not just with your patients?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it, one thing is like if you decide to work at a trauma company, you tend to be really mission driven.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like you kind of have to be. It's like it's just like, so I think there's like a deep level of trust that we're all coming from this with like the best of intentions, right? And like that we really truly care about what we're doing. I think also being clinician led has contributed to a level of trust here that like we're always really trying to do what's best for the patients. That's first and foremost. And so one thing that was really important to us is that we always tried to scale with quality, that the outcomes were always like, the first thing that we thought of is like we cannot scale if the outcomes like suffer. So I think that there's like a level of trust around like we're all doing this for the right reasons and also like we have the same priorities in mind, which I think is super important. We've spent a lot of time like thinking about culture and values as well, and really actively trying to develop them and practice them. And it's like again, I humbly say, and also like I think if I didn't say this, people would actually have less trust in me.
Yeah.
But I also humbly say, like, again, this is like a totally a moving target, right? Like organizational trust, I think is something that like is never a destination. Like it's something that you continually have to practice too. And so I think it's like, again, like also a moving target and like something that like you can never get too comfortable around.
Yes.
And so I humbly like will never say like we have super high trust in each other or whatever, because like it's just it's something that we always work on.
Yeah.
I'm smiling because we are talking about this so much internally.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah, a lot. And I love that reminder too. It's not a destination. We're not going to get there. It's this
Yeah.
ongoing continuum, just consistently examining and looking at it, and really appreciate that reminder.
Sophia, you probably have the more accurate statistics, but I did a quick Google
Yeah.
search, and about 70 to 80% of adults have experienced at least one traumatic event. these same people are showing up to work every day. So
Yeah.
if trauma is that just universal, where's
Yeah.
the responsibility and opportunity, in your opinion, for workplaces now in 2026? And what's your mandate to leaders listening in?
I think the first thing is that what I like to point out to people is like just because somebody has survived a trauma doesn't mean that they have symptoms from the trauma or like have PTSD. Because I think a lot of people actually conflate the two, right?
Mhm.
And I often say that trauma is just it's part of the human condition. Unfortunately, right? It's really really common, and also it shows how much humans can overcome in a lot of ways too, right? And so just because a couple things. I think I see oftentimes that we over fragilize people because they were trauma survivors when they actually like have been able, like, it's part of the human condition. They've been able to like build very full lives, and they're not necessarily asking for judgment or any type of interpretation of who they are because of that like history, right? So like there's a fine line around like over fragilizing or actually over indexing on somebody's trauma history when they don't see it as part of their identity, right? And then there's also like sometimes folks do have symptoms and do need support for it because like again it's 70%, 70 to 80% of the US population. Like just think about the like utter and sheer diversity of events and also of like stories within that. So like you cannot treat this group of people as like a monolith. Like they have different responses that they've had to the trauma. Some of it is like it doesn't, it's in the rearview mirror, and for some people they have active symptoms, right? And so I think for like workplaces and employers too, it's like it's really important to understand that like just because like this is not a label. Like this is not something that necessarily defines people, nor do they want it to. And like if someone is having challenges because they have it and potentially has symptoms, it is important to make sure that we support those folks. And so, oftentimes there's employers whose employees are exposed to work related injuries, right? Or there are folks who just happen, the population that they employ just happens to be a population that is more highly traumatized as well. I think it is mindful to try to build around like trauma informed like work practices as well. And we know that there's things that employers can do that actually prevent PTSD in their populations too. So actually training, like having more workplace training and prevention policies is helpful too. Supports, right? Providing supports, especially in the aftermath of something happening, is really important. And also being able to connect folks to resources if they do develop like, full blown symptoms of post traumatic stress disorder is also really important. So I think some of it is like, it's not even just like trauma informed like approaches. It's also just like the basics, like supporting your employees, giving them the training and tools so that they can do their jobs well and hopefully stay safe, right? And then also like connecting them to treatments and resources if they actually need it.
Caring about your people, essentially. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And it's actually science. Like, I mean, it's not rocket science, but it also is scientifically proven to actually reduce PTSD risks if your employees were actually exposed to a trauma.
Looking back at your journey, your career from clinician to building a startup, is there anything you
Yeah.
have to unlearn to become a more effective leader?
I think that, I mean, and this actually was very helpful in the beginning, but I think as we've started to scale and get bigger, I've had to like lay down my clinician hat like more and just think like a chief economic officer.
Mhm.
And in the beginning, I did both roles, right? Like I was a trauma therapist, and like it actually really helped me sell, right? Because, which I think it still helps me sell. But I think within the company, having too many perspectives, like dual perspectives and stuff like that, can actually sometimes make me less effective in advocating for the top priority of the business. And so I've had to just unlearn actually the different vantage points sometimes and just be like, okay, I am talking to you as an economic officer, not as a psychiatrist. Like put that out of your mind for a second, because I need to just represent this interest and somebody else will represent that interest.
Yeah, and you have the team in place, right, who
Yeah,
can wear those hats.
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
I feel that. It's interesting when you say that. I feel that a lot. And I'm head of people, head of HR, and um, oftentimes I feel like I have to talk to them and say, this is like not Jill the human. I've got my HR hat on specifically. I have to leave like Jill the human behind and just really be this head of people, which is sometimes challenging, but very useful. Yeah. I want to talk for a very quick second. I got to bring AI into the conversation for just a quick second, but we're talking about trauma. Trauma recovery is a deeply human process that many people will go through. As we move further along in this AI boom, what's one part of human healing that technology will never be able to replicate?
So I'm gonna answer the question, but I'm gonna back up to like one of the assumptions, like some of the assumptions that I'm making. I think that like I don't think that it's necessarily impossible for someone to heal from like an AI enabled, solution or app, right? I absolutely think that there's probably some folks with PTSD who actually don't want to have a human in their care. Like they want to do something like extremely private potentially, right? Or some people want medications. That's like also just like taking human out, right? So like I think that there will be potentially folks who are interested in that, but I think for the vast majority of trauma survivors, just because they can do something like that doesn't necessarily mean that they want to, because part of surviving a trauma is and frankly developing PTSD is like having your trust in humanity and in the world violated, right? And so even if those things do exist, I still believe that the majority of folks do want to heal with someone bearing witness to it in some way, right? With like that human connection, because it also helps. It's a corrective sort of it's a corrective experience, right? Having somebody bear witness and help in your healing from that like violation of trust. And so I think one of our theses is like there's lots of ways that like AI can drive efficiencies and like all of those things. And like I do believe that people want that human connection, and it feels more meaningful if they can recover with it than without it.
When you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up? And in what ways do you see that version of yourself showing up today?
So when I was a kid, I wanted to either be a doctor or a jazz saxophonist, like a saxophone player.
Two very different roles.
I know. But I did end up becoming, so I do play the saxophone. And I played like jazz all through college. Like I didn't become a professional musician. I went to medical school instead, but I actually did them. So that was great. I'm not a very good saxophone player though.
But you
That
are
is incredible that you did both.
Yeah, I tend to be like the type of person, like if I say like, hey, I want to like try to do this, I will do it. Like I'm not gonna like, yeah, I'm not a bluffer.
No, no. That's so wait, I feel like I need to see a picture of you playing the saxophone, just sitting here talking to you, and I'm having all these ideas, and my mind's kind of blown about all of your wisdom and knowledge and education and passion and care, and then just you playing the saxophone to me is like the coolest.
I mean, so it sounds like you very much manifested your future. So.
Thanks. So what's really cute too is our Department of Psychiatry has a jazz band. And it's so funny. It's just like a bunch of like psychiatry professors.
Are you in
It's
it?
very cute. Yeah, I'm in it. Yeah.
I'm like so happy right now. This is amazing. And basically what I feel like I'm feeling is vicarious joy, which I love that you gave us that term. And I think it's really special that that's something that in this field and what you're doing, that is actually something that really surprised you and is there so often, and really rewarding your team, which is amazing. Sofia Noori, co-founder and CEO of Nema Health. The final question is, what gives you hope about the future of work?
I should have seen this coming. I think that especially post-COVID, that there's so much more flexibility in how people work. I'm definitely someone who just I'm not a 9 to 5er. Like I'm not somebody who can just like segment my day. And we're a we're also like a remote workplace. After I had my first baby, like I just remember being like, it's like wild to be a working mom without this type of flexibility. Like I don't know how I could have come back to work as quickly as I did if I didn't have the opportunity to like actually, see my baby throughout the day still and things like that. So that was something that I really, really was appreciative of and grateful for.
Yeah. We feel the same. We're fully remote as well. And I don't know that any of us
Yeah.
could ever go back. Yeah.
And I feel the same just with time. And I have 3 pups, not even a human being. So
It's a lot of walking.
it's a lot of walking.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sophia. This was lovely. Thank you so much, really, for the time. We so appreciate it.